Good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you for joining. My name is Dorothy Gilliam. I am an air quality planner here at the North Central Texas Council of Governments. And with me today, I have Fred Yebra from the State Energy Conservation Office and Cassidy Ellis from the South Central Partnership for Energy Efficiency as a Resource, or SPEER. We're really excited to have you guys all on today. We have a wonderful participant list, so it's great to see some familiar names on there. And then just before we really get into it, we just have a quick question as it relates to our project that we are doing with the State Energy Conservation Office. So it's just a quick polling question. I'm going to launch the poll, and we're gonna see if this works. This is the first time we've done this before. So, and if you would just answer yes, no, or not applicable to the following question. So our work, COG's work on our SECO Regional Energy Manager project is being funded with federal grant dollars. And so we are asking if you would be willing to count your time as in-kind match for this project. And in order to count your time, you attest that your time is not being paid for. Oh, I think it might've got cut off there, but if it's not being paid for by federal dollars. And I'll just give it about a minute or so, about 20 more seconds. All right. All right, I see answers are slowing down. I'm gonna go ahead and end this poll. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you guys for answering that question, and then I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. Awesome. Sorry, Cass, next slide. I don't know. Oh, perfect. Okay, great. So, okay, so then before we get started, we just wanted to preface who we are and so who each of us is and our organizations and what our organizations are about and how do we support energy management efforts for entities across the state. So again, my name is Dorothy Gilliam. I am an air quality planner in the Transportation Department here at the COG. For those who don't know, COG is a regional, or NCTCOG is a regional planning agency that serves our North Texas local governments on a variety of topics. But we are working on a regional energy manager project, which is a project that our department, our transportation department, works on with our environment and development department here at COG. And this is an ongoing effort that we've been working on for the past 2 years. This will be our 3rd year to identify energy management needs and to increase awareness to the local government energy reporting requirements, which we're talking about today, and to provide resources to our local governments and energy conservation efforts. So I will go ahead and hand it over to Fred with SECO.
Oh, hello. My name is Fred Yebra with the State Energy Conservation Office. I am an energy engineer here, but I do a lot of things, including working with the local government's energy reporting programs. So it's a pleasure to be here with Dorothy and Cassidy and go over a presentation on local governments.
Great, thanks, Fred. And I'm Cassidy Ellis. I'm the local government's program manager at SPEER, South Central Partnership for Energy Efficiency as a Resource. It's a mouthful. SPEER is a regional energy efficiency organization. We're based in Austin, but we serve Texas and Oklahoma. And I run through SPEER a program called the City Efficiency Leadership Council, which is funded by SECO. And we are a collaborative organization of local governments across the state, sharing energy management best practices and strengthening relationships amongst local governments. And I also provide support and outreach for local government energy reporting statewide outside of the North Central Texas region.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cassidy. I'm really happy to have both Cassidy and Fred on the line today. Awesome. So our agenda, so what we're going to cover today, so we talked about who we are, and then we're going to get into why these local government energy, why this local government energy reporting requirement exists, what exactly is the requirement, a brief history on this requirement and its impact, some of our outreach efforts and improvement efforts to this reporting requirement and the annual reporting form. And then Cassidy's going to dive into the 2020 local government energy reporting form. And then she's also going to cover our frequently asked questions document she created related to this new reporting form. And we are going to talk about some of our COG developed resources related to the local government energy reporting, and then also some SECO resources. And then we're going to finish up with some key dates and reminders. And then we're going to also finish up with some Q&A. So excited to get into it. And then I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you, Fred.
Okay, Dorothy, are you going to advance the slides, or do you want me to advance the slides?
It's going to be Cassidy. Cassidy's going to.
Oh, Cassidy. Okay. All right. Again, I am delighted to be here and with Cassidy and Dorothy, and I'm going to start off by showing you a picture that might hurt your eyes or make you sneeze, but this is a picture of what we're talking about when we mention local energy, local government energy reporting. We're trying to address the local air pollution that occurs in a lot of our urban areas. Our urban areas are one of the most high air pollution areas in the state, and they have the most what is called ozone days that occurs during the months of July, August, and September, when it's pretty hot, over 100 degrees out there. And so that's how ozone pollution gets started. And I mentioned these are it occurs in a lot of the urban areas. Cassidy, can you switch over to slide 7 real quick so I can just show them? 7, there you go. Next.
Is that not it's the next slide?
The next one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have the numbers. Is this the slide?
Yes. So
Okay.
so I was talking about the urban areas. These are the 41 counties that are being closely monitored by both the TCEQ, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and the EPA. They're monitoring the air pollution in these counties. And again, these are the heavy populated areas where, we're talking about Central Texas, Houston, Beaumont, Galveston area, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, a little bit over here on Nueces County, where a lot of the refineries and petrochemical industries are. But these are the urban areas where we're talking about that we are primarily focused with regard to the local government energy reports. Okay, we could go back to slide 5, the cartoon that this. How is ozone formed? Everybody probably knows this, but it is formed by mixing these chemicals, components like NOx, nitrogen oxide, and VOCs, volatile organic compounds that are produced by industry, factories, power plants, homes and businesses. They all produce electricity or use electricity that comes from power plants. The power plants send up these emissions up their stacks. And same thing with motor vehicle exhaust fumes. When these chemicals react or are heated up by 100+ degree days, this is what happens, the pollution that you saw on the slide. So next slide, please. So when you want to get more specific on the percentages, the sources of air pollution emissions in our state, 26% of the NOx and 6% of the VOC emissions are from point source pollutions, which like, for instance, the power plants I was mentioning. Those are the breakouts from the various sources. There's area source, on-road mobile, point source, and so forth. So next slide. Okay, so back in 2001, well, maybe let's go to the next slide, Cassidy. Back in 2001, the Texas legislature issued a finding that says basically there are ways that cities and governments and utilities and colleges and buildings can help reduce air pollution. They passed this bill, Senate Bill 5, that establish some percentage goals to reduce emissions associated with electricity consumption in those targeted counties, areas. They're called non-attainment areas for reducing or recording and reporting the energy use of these sources of air pollution. 2000, and then 3 times the legislature has passed bills that continue on this path to get public entities to report their energy usage in their buildings. And I'm talking about local governments, county governments, state agencies, the universities, electric utility companies, all of these organizations or sectors are required to report to the legislature through our office, SECO, and provide this information to help in terms of monitor, quantify the emissions and the reductions associated with air pollutions. So next slide.
Do you want to go back to this one, Fred?
So this slide talks about the legislation says in these 41 counties, we are establishing a goal to reduce electricity consumption by 5%. So we're asking the local governments, county governments, public sectors to establish a goal and report their progress towards meeting those goals. And that's what we're talking about with the local government's energy reports. And those are the 41 counties. Next slide. So what we do at the energy office is we take all of these reports, as I was saying, from counties, local governments, school districts, state agencies, universities, and public utilities, and we submit our data that you provide. We submit it to the Energy Systems Laboratory at Texas A&M University. They have, their their engineering groups that are specialized in software analysis to take the energy data and convert it or translate it to what that means in terms of emissions effect on air pollution. And so you can see that 1.3 tons per day of NOx were reduced in 2018. That is a significant amount. But anyway, they put these quantified data into reports that go, to the TCEQ, to which reports to the Texas legislature, and these reports also go to EPA to show them the progress that we are doing here in the state to control, reduce, emissions associated with electric energy use. So I believe I'll turn it over to Cassidy for.
Yes, Fred, thank you so much for that background. Awesome. So this slide is just showing the composition or the breakdown of entities who submitted their 2019 local government energy report to SECO. As you can see, a large percentage is from municipalities. We've also got counties in there, institutes of higher education, and state agencies. And then other. So other here includes entities such as water districts, appraisal districts, and utility districts who are also submitting a report through this requirement. I think one of our goals from a COG perspective is to try to increase awareness amongst our state agencies. In our institutes of higher education, there are many reporting requirements that these state agencies and institutes of higher education are subject to in Texas. So we'll touch on it a little bit later, but we're thinking the low compliance rate to this reporting requirement may have something to do with the numerous reporting requirements out there for these entities. And then we also just wanted to highlight again, these reporting requirements do apply to each political subdivision, institute of higher education, and state agency located in 41 affected counties in Texas. And then we also included a little bit of language. This language at the bottom left-hand side of the screen is from the statute itself, and it's defining what a political subdivision is. So moving on to the next slide. Thanks, Cassidy. Awesome. So, and I think this slide, it has some outdated numbers on it. So 2012 should not be 66, and 2013 should not be 179. It should be 32 and 91. But this is from our records, the number of local government energy reports that were submitted from 2012 to 2019. And as you can see, there isn't quite necessarily a trend over time in reporting compliance. But as you can see, from 2018 to 2019, there is a substantial jump in the number of reports that were submitted. We don't want to say that number was as a complete result of from Cassidy's efforts and our efforts at COG, but we did start our outreach and technical assistance efforts at the beginning of 2019, so prior to the reporting deadline for 2019 reports. And we're hoping that that was helpful in getting many of those reports submitted that year. And then coming after post 2019, so looking to the future, SECO is hoping that this data will be accessible. The data that is submitted to them via these reports will be publicly accessible on their website. So that is something to look forward to or potentially see in the future from SECO. We just found out about that. So very exciting stuff. And then next slide, please. Awesome. And then Cassidy, I'm gonna let you take it away.
Thanks, Dorothy. Yeah, I apologize. I'm not sure why this slide didn't end up as the current one, but for those who are noticing the numbers not matching up with 2012 and 2013, those numbers are about 35 and about 90 in those early years. So as many of you know, if you've been in touch with Dorothy or myself over the last couple of years, that there has been a significant sort of increase in attention and effort around these reporting requirements, trying to increase awareness of their requirements, understanding and provide resources and technical support. Kind of in the background of that, those efforts and in increasing awareness is a reporting technical working group that has been convened with those of us who sort of administer this reporting requirement. So we met intentionally at the beginning of 2020 to work on developing process improvements and form improvements for this reporting process. So the 4 players in that technical working group are SECO, who is the named administrator of these reporting requirements in the statute itself. They're responsible for developing the form, for collecting the reports. They're really the official administrator. NCTCOG and SPEER, we have both been engaged as contractors to assist with the outreach and education and technical assistance to the reporting entities who are on the call today. So that's largely who we have in the audience. And I'm glad to see some familiar names and faces join us today. So not only are we responsible for getting the word out, but we also are responsible for providing direct assistance, answering questions. And then we are the liaison of the feedback that we receive from all of you back to the folks who actually administer the report and the technical development of the program. And then the third kind of arm of the tripod is that Texas Energy Systems, Texas A&M Energy Systems Lab. And not only are they responsible for that evaluation of the data and reporting, but they're really our technical guidance. So if we are trying to understand the technical basis for these reporting requirements, or what data points we're really looking for, we go back to the big team of PhDs over there at ESL to guide us. So just sort of a little bit of background on what Dorothy and I have been working on for the last few years. So our efforts really kicked off in 2018, where we assessed kind of where we are, where the reporting process was, where the known challenges and level of understanding, and also really worked on identifying the affected entities. So we put together an extensive list, primarily focusing on municipalities and county governments in the affected counties, and trying to get a better contact list put together. In 2019, we did our first year of outreach. We had some interviews with some reporting entities, again, to better understand the challenges and needs of the reporting process. And we developed some resources to guide affected entities, not only in their reporting, but also in their overall energy management goals. And as you saw on Dorothy's slide, there was a pretty successful outreach campaign with a pretty substantial increase in reports submitted in 2019. For the last year, we have continued this effort, again, with more structure around getting feedback from reporting entities. Dorothy is going to talk about a working group that the COG convened in a little bit. And then I developed a frequently asked questions document, which we'll go through. And then over the last 6 weeks or so, 6 to 8 weeks, as many of you are aware, we have been in the trenches of our outreach campaign, talking to many of you on the phone or on the line, and getting the word out about the 2020 reporting. So through this process, there have been some pretty substantial changes in the reporting form and process itself. For many years, the report was done on a PDF that you can see here on the left side of the screen. This was either filled out digitally or by hand and emailed to SECO. And believe it or not, then that data was manually put into a data set, and that data set was delivered to ESL. So it was a pretty time and work intensive process to get that data to the appropriate authorities. So in 2019, we introduced the first entirely online digital form, which you can see in the middle. It was a good start, and we were able to get a fully digital data set, which enabled Dorothy and I to easily deliver last year's reports to anyone who reported. So you should have received an email from one of us with your report from last year if you submitted it. If you haven't received that and you know that you submitted a report, reach out to us and we can provide those to you. And now in 2020, we are continued with a digital reporting form, and there's been some process improvements. based on the feedback that we received last year and some changes to the data points that are reported in that form. So the new 2020 reporting form, it has 9 sections listed here. Most of the sections do have some mandatory information included. So sections 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, and 9 are required. Some are more expensive than others. Portions of section 4, which is the consumption data, is also required. And then other portions of section 4 and all of section 5 are optional. So this may seem a little sort of abstract. So we thought it would be helpful to actually pull up the form, show you what the website looks like, and walk through a reporting process. So let's report. I'm going to switch my screen here. And okay, I just also wanted to make sure that we haven't been missing anything in the chat. So we are going to take questions at the end, but as I'm going through this, if you have questions, go ahead and shoot those in the chat, and we'll make sure and loop back on those. So 1 second, let me prepare for the long talk that I'm about to go through. So this is the SECO Local Government Energy Reporting website. SECO is the Department of the Comptroller. That's why you will see that up there. And this kind of lays out a lot of the information that Fred just shared with you. And then when you are ready to report, this is where you go. I want to alert you to a couple things on this site. The reporting help guide linked right here. This is a breakdown of what data points you will need to provide for each section. So it's kind of a cheat sheet for you to prepare your data before you sit down and report. And then information about the programs that we've been discussing are down here, as well as a link to the frequently asked questions document that I'll be going through in a little bit. Fred's contact information is here, as well as the direct email address. And Fred's contact information will also be shared at the end of this presentation. Okay, so when you're ready to report, you click here on Submit a Report. And it'll take you automatically to the form, which is run through a SurveyMonkey portal. There is some instructions here that explain if you do want to start your report and get part of the way through it and come back to it, there now is a process to save, your report. It does require some pretty specific steps to make sure that you share. So I encourage you to look through that, but I also advise that you look at that reporting help guide ahead of time to know what data you will need to prepare before you dive right in. Okay, so in this first section, you're just looking for who we're reporting. And I am actually going to have to fill this out so I can progress through, so bear with me as I put in information. I am just going to report as if I'm reporting for my organization. Of course, that's not, I'm not a real organization. So I'm going to say that I'm a municipality, my contact information. So the person that is identified here under the contact information really should be a permanent employee of the reporting entity, because this person will be put into the contact list and be the recipient of the reporting data the following year. So of course, there's a lot of staff turnover in cities, we understand that, or in public entities, but as much as possible, try and identify a person that you expect to be permanent. I will say we're in Bexar County, contact. Okay. All right, next. Section 2 asks you if you have established a reduction goal. This is a common question. It is okay if you have not established a reduction goal. This question is not asking if you have achieved that reduction goal. It is just asking if you have set a goal. So if you have and the goal does not absolutely need to be official. This is another common question we receive. It is advised that it is an official goal and that it is adopted by your city council or your county judge or something like that. But it can be a departmental goal. It can be an unofficial goal. But in this case, I'm going to say that no, we don't have a goal currently. We're working towards it, but we don't yet have one. So I'm going to say no. Section 3 is the reporting period. One major change from the 2019 and prior year reports is that we are now specifically asking for calendar year data. So this is so that we can get all of the reporting entities on the same cycle so that the calculation of those emissions reductions can all be aligned around that calendar year. So we are looking for generally January 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2020, although many of you may be aware that your electricity bill may actually cover January 15th to January 15th of the following year. So try and align this 12-month period as closely with the calendar year, but if you have bills that are a little off, that's fine. But for now, I'm just going to use the calendar year here and click next. So now we get into really the heart of this form, the consumption data portion of the form. You will notice that there are some fields that have an asterisk and some fields that do not. Those fields with asterisks are the required data points. So the required data points are numbers of buildings, total gross square footage of those buildings, and total building consumption. And then if we scroll down to the big number, the really important number is your total overall electricity consumption for your entity. Now, this is consumption for the facilities and the energy, electricity using end uses that are owned or otherwise controlled by the reporting entity. So for instance, you may have a portion of your building that you lease out to a tenant, and that tenant pays the electricity bill for that suite. Do not include that in your reporting. You may also have a building that the city does not necessarily own, but again, you pay the electricity bill. You have control over whether or not the lights are on or the HVAC system is on. You do include that. So you don't necessarily have to own the asset if you have control and you pay the utility bills associated with that asset. So we are just going to put in some dummy information here. So we're going to talk about a somewhat smaller city in this example. So we have 20 buildings, and I have some example data here. Let me get to it. So we have, let's say that these 20 buildings are about 240,000 gross square feet, and the total kilowatt hour consumption for those buildings is about 5 million kWh. Now, I am using rounded example numbers. It is best that these are exact numbers. So, don't round the way that I am, but it is intended to be your actual consumption numbers. There are a number of other fields here that are optional, and the reason that the form now includes optional information is because in addition to the air quality reasons for this reporting requirement to exist, there is sort of a secondary potential value that it offers. It creates a sort of format and forum for reporting entities to put together the data around their energy use. And putting together and consolidating annual energy consumption data is one of the first steps in an energy management program. So these optional categories are giving you sort of an annual reminder to track and consolidate that information so that you over time can have a historic record of what's going on with our electricity consumption. How has our use and our footprint changed over time? For traffic lights, again, these are traffic lights that are owned by the entity. So let's say that this community has about 60 traffic lights, and those traffic lights consume, say we have 500 traffic lights, and those consume about 1 million kilowatt hours a year. Street lighting, this is another common question that we see in reporting. So it is known that street lighting is often owned by the utility or Texas Department of Transportation. So again, we are only interested in looking at the street lighting that is owned by the reporting entity. If you do not own the street light, do not report on it. Okay, so let me see. I do see that we have some chat coming through, so I want to make sure that okay. Consumption data is for facilities that existed September 1, 2011, correct? Okay, good question, Steve. So since the statute was reauthorized in 2019, that actually reset the baseline. So we are now looking for a new baseline number. So you're not going, if you have been reporting for years, you may know that there was an earlier baseline, but now with the new reauthorization, we're actually looking to reestablish your baseline year this year. So we will need new numbers. And then next question, do we leave those blank if they do not apply to us? Yes, exactly. So if you do not own any streetlights or any potable water supply facilities, if any of these categories do not apply to you, or you just do not have the data to be able to isolate these numbers, it is okay to leave them blank, or it is okay to put a 0. For any situation where it's kind of unclear how where to put the information, or you had some sort of internal understanding of where to put information, I do encourage you to make a note of that later on in the form in the additional feedback portion of the form. That's really a great place to put notes like, we do not own our streetlights or something like that. Okay. Traffic lighting is traffic signals. Yes, correct. Yeah, so don't get too wrapped up in the numbers that I'm actually putting up, because some of them may not really represent how much is being consumed, but they're just sort of placeholders. So we will say that this community has 500 streetlights, and those streetlights use about 1.4 million kWh. Okay. Potable water supply facilities and water treatment facilities. This is another major change from the last version of the form. The unit that we are looking at now is the amount of water that's conveyed through these facilities per day. So we're looking for the average million of gallons of water either supplied or treated per day as the unit for these data points. So let's just say 10 and I don't know, let's say 60,000 kilowatt hours. And then we'll put the same number on the wastewater facility. Okay. Another area that we have increased data collection is around electric vehicles. This was an acknowledgement that some cities in the working group noted that they expect to increase the number of electric vehicles in their city fleets, which may end up resulting in an overall increase in electricity as they are buying less gasoline but using more electricity to charge those vehicles. So so we've incorporated this into the form mostly as sort of data background to start understanding what the actual sort of impact of electric vehicles are in fleets at this point. But again, this is a optional data point. Let's say that there are 5 EVs in this fleet, and that those charging stations that are used to charge those EVs are using about 15,000 kWh a year. If your electric vehicle charging stations are just plugged directly into a building and are not separately metered, then you would include that in your building number. This is only if you actually can isolate the consumption of those charging stations. And then we have now included an other category. This is intended to be a catch-all for any of those other kind of unusual building use type or end use types that don't cleanly fit into any of these categories. The frequently asked questions document does provide a little bit of guidance on what to include in each of these categories. So if you're not entirely sure where to put something, I encourage you to reference that FAQ. And if it doesn't make sense to put it anywhere else, put it in other and make a note later on in the form. Ultimately, your the main required piece of information is the total electricity consumption for all of these use categories, and it should add up. It should be the sum of the pieces that you've reported above. So I'm just going to put a number that may not actually add up to what I put above. Okay, let me catch any additional questions. Can you have multiple categories within other? Yeah, Emily, if you use the other category, combine everything there, and then later on in the form, include a note that explains what is in that other category. And I'll show you where that is. Okay. Does total consumption include accounts that our entity does not directly pay for, but passes an invoice to a business tenant, et cetera? I would say in that case, since you are not in charge of how the electricity is actually being used in that case, you're just a pass through on that bill, then you would not include that. Yes, Steve, good question. Oftentimes streetlights are not actually metered. Most of the time they're not actually metered. So if your streetlight utility bill has some sort of kWh multiplier that makes an assumption that they're running for a certain number of hours per day, you include that number. But if you're just paying a flat amount, then I would not include that number in there. Okay. Any other questions on this portion of the form before we move on to the next one? Okay. So the next portion of the form is entirely optional information, but again, it's sort of in an effort to help reporting entities have a full picture of how their energy and related costs are being distributed. Long-term, kind of as part of the support program that we have put together, I think there is a lot of a desire for there to be a feedback loop to reporting entities to let you know about what your data means, how your data compares to other entities. And in acknowledgement of that, we included the natural gas piece because in order to really understand how a building is performing energy-wise, you really need to consider both the electricity use as well as the gas use, because an all-electric building may appear to be really underperforming if you don't consider another building's natural gas. So again, this is all optional information, and it's broken out in similar categories as the electricity consumption. But we do encourage you to find this information and at least start incorporating it into your sort of considerations of your energy use over time. We have defined the unit for natural gas consumption. Be very careful that natural gas can be billed or metered in multiple different units. It could be in BTUs, it could be in CCS, it could be in MCS. So pay attention to how your unit, what unit you're using, and you may need to do a conversion for potentially. And then similarly, there is an interest in looking into water use data because water consumption has a direct relationship to energy consumption. And so it's kind of continuing to flesh out and give you that bigger picture of where your resources and where your energy and resource use is going. So that's the end of section 4. And then section 5 is a completely new section and is a completely optional section. Again, this is sort of acknowledging that some communities and cities may be starting to put renewable energy, either solar PV or wind or other sources on your buildings directly, or you may be purchasing contracts from your energy suppliers that are sourced from renewable energy sources. The thing to keep in mind here is that regardless of if you are getting your energy from renewable energy, you want to include every kilowatt hour you consume in that earlier section. I'll go back to it. In this earlier section 4, regardless of if you got some of these kilowatt hours from solar array, you want to include them in here, but then you can break them out for your own sort of record keeping and assessment in this renewable energy data section. This is also sort of in an effort to start to understand how much renewable energy we really are seeing out there amongst communities and entities in Texas. So again, it's broken out into different categories. If you have on-site solar panels, so you actually have them on your roof, you put them in this category. If you purchase a contract where there's a solar farm out in West Texas or a wind farm out in West Texas, you break those out separately into these categories. And then there is the additional comment section, which is intended to sort of be the place where you can capture any of the nuance related to these contracts. There are other renewable energy sources included, so biomass. If you have a biomass that is a combined heat and power plant, for instance, you might include that there, and then geothermal. So any questions on this before I move on? Okay. So the next section, section 6, this is really to assess your participation as well as interest in the programs that the State Energy Conservation Office offers to support energy management for your communities. SECO has some really excellent resources that are free of charge to your community, and Dorothy's going to go over those in a little bit more detail later. But in this section, you select if you have participated, if you are currently participating in these programs, or if you're interested in learning more. There are links to each of the program pages. City Efficiency Leadership Project was my program, but there are 3 other programs that are listed here. You should be able to select multiple across these buttons. So say you have already, you have had a Lone Star Finance project in the past, but you also would like to pursue an additional Lone Star loan in the future, you can select multiple. Again, if there's any clarification or explanation that you need to provide, you can include that in the additional comments here. And then section 7 is the areas of improvement. So this is really where we're wanting to learn what you have done over the last 3 years to towards your energy management goal. So we have now defined that we are looking at 3 years, because in the past we've seen reporting entities that they may have done some sort of air conditioning improvement or lighting improvement, but they did it 10 years ago. So that's not necessarily changing their energy consumption anymore. So we're really looking at the recent past for these improvements. And again, they are broken out into different categories. So you may, for instance, have a energy management system that is an ongoing, you use that EMS system to monitor energy use always. So you would select ongoing or continuous for something like that. And then there may be plenty of cases where you just don't have, for instance, you may not have a combined heat and power plant in your community. That's probably the case for 99% of communities in Texas. So in that case, you would select not applicable. And again, there is an interested in learning more section here as well. And that's so that Dorothy and I and SECO can get back to you and ask you, what you would like to learn more about and if we can provide resources. Okay. In addition to, so this first section really focuses on the retrofits to the buildings themselves, things that you've actually changed in your facilities and installed, physical improvements. This next section is interested in policies, processes, and training. So this is really efforts to change behavior or evaluate and assess energy savings opportunities. So this is, again, this may be where you have a number of continuous efforts. You may continuously track your utility data, and you may be in the process of developing an energy policy plan or program. So again, select those radio buttons. If something is just not applicable to your community, select NA. Okay. And then this final section is looking at a number of resources that may be outside of your entity government and your city government or county government that might help you towards your energy management goals. So this is using a third party such as an energy services company to help you track your data, to help evaluate efficiency opportunities. If you have pursued a energy savings performance contract, which is a contracting method for efficiency, if you have done a streetlight inventory with a third party, this is where you would identify that information. This might also be a great place to say interested in learning more if you're unfamiliar with what third parties might be able to do to help you. Okay. How are we doing on time?
Doing good.
Oh,
Yeah, we've got about a little less than 40 minutes.
okay. It will alert you to if, you may have to, it looks like you do have to select something for all of these in order for it to progress. Sorry, folks. Let me just see if I can get it to go forward. Okay, great. So section 8 this is where I keep referencing the kind of additional information, additional feedback. This is sort of a catch-all text box for you to provide any background or explanation about any of the numbers that you've provided earlier, or you want to just provide a little bit more detail on what kind of projects and work that you're working on in your community. Okay, so now section 9. This is where you do actually know whether or not you have shown a reduction from the prior year's report. So again, earlier in section 2, we said there was the question about if you have the goal. This is really where you're noting whether or not you met that goal or you actually have shown a reduction. So yes, if you have shown a goal, that's easy. No, if you haven't. And then this third option of no, we cannot achieve our 5% reduction, and we have evaluated all cost-effective measures. So the statute itself does provide language that establishes an exemption path. And many of you have approached me and Dorothy about questions of, we just can't afford to do any improvements. We've looked at all we can. So the statute does offer an exemption pathway, but it does have some very specific requirements for pursuing that exemption pathway. So what we have here is if you have reported you have to put your consumption information together, and you have to have done some sort of documented assessment to show that you have tried to identify efficiency opportunities and there isn't anything that's cost effective, you may pursue that exemption pathway. The definition of cost effective is in the statute. It's a little bit unclear, but basically the test for cost effectiveness is, does the improvement pay for itself within its useful life or within 20 years, whichever is less? So that's a little convoluted, but basically if you put in lighting and it's going to pay for itself within the time that the lighting is expected to be useful, then it is a cost-effective measure. If it's not, if it won't pay for itself, then it's not. See a question on here. How do we assess a savings in the event our organization is growing? Things. So great question, Valerie. That is one of the main reasons why the building square footage data point has been incorporated into the form. So even though a lot of Texas is a growing state, and most of our medium and small size, actually every city in Texas is growing for the most part. So you may be adding buildings, and of course your electricity consumption is going to increase when you put a new building online. That's why we encourage you to look at not only your total electricity consumption over time, but also consider looking at it on a consumption per square footage basis. So you might be able to show that even though you're technically increasing your consumption over time, your use per square foot is actually decreasing over time, because those new buildings that you're adding to your city's facilities are going to be more efficient just by virtue of being a newer building operating under a new energy code and having more efficient equipment in it. So even if when you get to this question, if you can't say that your total consumption has decreased, I do encourage you to say, you know, but we have shown a reduction in our per square footage consumption. Does that help, Valerie, or do you feel free to add more clarification if you need? Okay, great. So if you, going back to the exemption, if you do determine that you've evaluated your consumption for the last couple of years, you've evaluated cost to see if there's any cost-effective measures, and you just can't find anything that's cost-effective, you can pursue the exemption option. So if you choose to, and read through this information in detail, you select this box right here, and then you upload that additional justification for your exemption request in this file upload button right here. So you choose the file and you upload it. There's also a kind of catch-all upload right here in the form. This is for if you have a more extensive or detailed analysis, or you want to provide the data breakout for your report, or you just really want to upload anything. You know, hopefully it's not a note to SECO saying this was annoying and I don't want to do this anymore. But you upload that right here. Let me grab this one question. Can we count using green power, solar, wind towards our kWh reduction as it is reducing the overall emissions produced? Thank you. So Savannah, great question. That is the exact reason why the form now has a renewable energy section. So I'm going to click back through and get back to where we were. So in the overall consumption number that you provide in section 4, you do include all electricity consumed, even if it was coming from a green power contract. You include that kWh number in this field because it's still representing the consumption, the overall electricity consumption for the community. Although, yes, there is an overall emissions reduction. So in that emissions, to acknowledge the emissions reduction in section 5, this is where you would say that Our city consumed 10 million kWh, but 50% of that is coming from a green energy contract. So 5 million kWh is coming from a wind contract, and we put that here. Next question. Is there some list of things we can do or review in our organization to reduce energy consumption? Great question. So this is where all of these sort of different radio button selections are a really good place to start, Paul. So in section 7, there is a list of all sorts of different retrofits and upgrades that could have could result in an energy use reduction. So you can go down this list and look at these and see if you've thought about any of these updates or upgrades. And included in that is some of these policies and sort of programs that you could put into place. But a really, really great place to look and a great place to start is by using the free resources available from the State Energy Conservation Office. So again, Dorothy's going to talk about this a little more detail, but a preliminary energy assessment or using the technical assistance available means that an engineer will come out to your city free of charge and do an assessment of your buildings, identify savings opportunities, and put together a report, and you don't have to pay one shiny penny for it. So it's a really great resource to start you in identifying ways to save. Okay. So that is the extent of the form. I'm not going to submit, but when you do, you put it here. Okay. I'm going to switch back. And while I do that, I see that there's another really important question coming through, which I'm glad someone brought this up about COVID. Okay, so I'll just read it out. We had half staff working from home for much of the year to provide social distancing during COVID. This will mean at the end of the year, we expect higher than this year usage and may not meet our 5% goal. Will COVID be a recognized reason for an exception? So there has been some discussion of the fact that that 2020 consumption may not be representative of your overall. So there are two approaches. You can use your 2019 consumption as your baseline, or you can sort of include in the 2020 report that note, and then your 2021 report, if you don't show a reduction, you explain it as your 2020 number was not representative. But again, the exemption is really only intended for if you have assessed your facilities and to determine if there's any cost-effective efficiency upgrades available. So the cost effectiveness shouldn't necessarily be impacted by the reduced consumption in 2020. And we have actually, part of our conversation also had to do with, in particular, school districts, but some public facilities where your 2020 consumption may actually be higher than usual because of increased ventilation usage. And we do expect particularly schools will actually show an increase in energy use in 2021 once we're back at full occupancy, because those ventilation systems, we're going to be increasing the amount of outside air in buildings in general. So, you know, as with so many things, COVID has really changed the dynamic. I'm realizing we are pretty tight on time, so I'm going to keep going, but we will loop back on the questions. So, as I mentioned a couple times, I developed a frequently asked questions document. It will include the download link. I have covered a few of the key questions in this presentation. I already sort of talked about a few of them, so I'll go through these pretty quickly. So one, the formal adoption of a reduction goal, it is recommended, it is not mandatory. So I already mentioned that earlier. Next, What electricity consumption should be included? Again, this is electricity consumption that you pay the utility bill and you control the use of electricity. So we discussed leased for spaces versus not leased spaces. Next, where can I find my electricity consumption data? Number one question that I get is, where do I get this information? The easiest place to look is the customer service number on your utility bill or the website for your utility provider. Many of these providers offer this information online, but there are a number of other sources. Smart Meter Texas is a state-run website that is for any of the areas served by Encore, CenterPoint, or AEP. And your data should be available on that platform. And then one place that you may not necessarily think to look is, again, if you're working with a third-party provider, they may already have access to your data, and you might consider asking them if they can help you put together the data, or they may already have that information put together for you. So ask for help. They might even do it for free. This is a breakout of what those end uses are. This is straight out of the FAQ. So if you're not sure where to put something, again, I encourage you to look back on that. But really the most important data points that we're looking for is the total electricity consumption, the building electricity consumption, and the square footage of the buildings. And then this kind of gets into the exemption. My community is very small. We don't use a lot of electricity, or I'm interested in filing for an exemption. There is no minimum size requirement in the statute. So yes, you do still have to report even if you're small, but you may have an easier path to that exemption if you really just don't have a lot of use in your facilities. And then again, what does the cost effective mean? And that the short answer is the measure should pay for itself within its useful life or 20 years, whichever is less. And then can I get access to my reports from previous years? Yes, absolutely. Reach out to me, Dorothy, or Fred. Okay. Dorothy, I hope you still have time to get through everything.
Oh, absolutely. That's no problem. And I know those questions that we have in the chat, we do have time for Q&A. I will make sure that we leave time for Q&A, so we will get to those. So great. This was good. Thank you, Cassidy. That was super informative.
Dorothy,
yes. Yes, go ahead.
I'm not sure. I can't hear you. I don't know if other folks are having trouble hearing you.
Oh gosh, I might. Can you hear me now? Okay. We get okay. Perfect. Wonderful. Well, okay, Cassidy, let me know if you can't hear me. But I'm gonna. Oh, gotcha. Oh Lord. Okay. We're gonna keep trucking along. So we're just gonna hop into a couple resources. So starting off, we as a COG, our team developed resources last year in our past couple of years working with our energy management work. And most recently, in this past year, 2020, we developed a white paper that explores some of the challenges and best practices that we identified from entities within our region and across the state regarding the local government energy reporting. So I'm going to dive into that white paper a little bit further. And all of these, the white paper and these 2 case studies on this slide are linked. So definitely feel free to go check those out. And all of the resources on this slide can be accessed via our Conserve North Texas website, which is a clearinghouse for all things transportation, energy, and water related. So then next up, we have 2 case studies, and these are both energy related. So one is about the Tarrant Regional Water District, the development of their energy management plan, and then also the City of Louisville's energy consumption reduction efforts. And then also last year, our team developed a quote unquote toolkit for the local government energy reporting. The toolkit just contains resources, links to all of our trainings that we conducted last year related to energy management. It contains a matrix of different energy reporting requirements I'll also touch in a little bit, but that toolkit is great. So if you are interested in any of these resources, definitely feel free to check them out. All right, and then next slide. Thanks, Cassidy. Awesome. Okay, so then going back to our white paper, this white paper, as Cassidy may have mentioned, well, we developed this white paper as part of a working group that we convened. And through that working group, we identified challenges that some of our local governments were facing related to this reporting requirement, the annual report, the consumption reduction goal. So we wanted to find some best practices for those challenges, but then suggested strategies that local governments could implement to achieve those best practices. And I know the link is a little hard to see at the bottom of the screen, but to download that white paper, you can go ahead and click there and read through it. It's got a lot of really good information and is all specific to this new annual reporting form. Next slide, please. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, so as I mentioned, our working group, we did convene a working group, small working group from March to June of last year. Again, we wanted to identify any barriers that our local governments were facing with compliance to this reporting requirement and opportunities that we could identify to improve the effectiveness of this requirement. So briefly, some identified challenges. Of course, we heard from a lot of our local governments that having the adequate resources to complete the required reporting was challenging at times, especially if a city is smaller and doesn't have a dedicated person to not only complete this requirement, but run any sort of energy management or efficiency programs or projects. So we did have some best practices that could help mitigate that. And one of those is trying to create and foster some interdepartmental collaboration and communication. So trying to work with other departments within your organization to get the necessary data that's required for this report, because this report, as Cassidy was showing, there are required sections with required data, but for those optional sections, oftentimes one person in the entity doesn't have access to all of that data at that one time. So working with other departments and other staff members to try to get all of that data to have a more complete picture when you're submitting your report can be really helpful. And then also leveraging other institutional priorities to gain management buy-in. So trying to work with your management and in terms of this reporting requirement is related to attaining those federal ozone standards within our ozone non-attainment areas. So calculating the impacts of energy efficiency can also help our political subdivisions support broader goals, and goals such as public health goals or economic objectives. And then our next challenge was falling short of that 5% reduction goal. So a couple best practices would be trying to complete that full annual report. So including that optional data, using those notes and comment sections to your advantage, just so you're filling out this report, not only submitting it to SECO, but for your own records can be really helpful. And you're providing that holistic picture of your energy use. And then adopting and enforcing the latest and greatest building codes is also a great way or best practice. And then also using that required square footage data, as Cassidy had mentioned, in relation to that question. So using that square footage data to assess an energy use index. The energy use index is an expression of a building's energy use as a function of its size or other characteristics. So awesome, I know we're gonna get through these real quickly, but thanks, Cassidy. Next slide, awesome. Okay, we just wanted to quickly touch, this is a matrix that can be also accessed on our Conserve North Texas website. The link is at the bottom. This matrix we developed in the first year of our energy management project because we were running into so many different reporting requirements that we were confused as to what entities did these reporting requirements apply to. So we tried to outline all of the reporting requirements we could find in Texas that our entities were required to submit things for. So just the various state mandated energy reporting requirements. As you can see, that second row is what we're talking about today. It's the local government energy reporting. And then on this top row, we wanted to highlight, we've been getting a couple inquiries and questions related to this reporting requirement, which is part of the government code. So this is not related to energy efficiency in any way necessarily. It is related to transparency, so financial transparency. So all governmental entities in this state of Texas are applicable to this program or requirement. And it is, entities are supposed to post their utility consumption data, so electricity, water, and natural gas consumption, to an accessible internet website. So more detail about that requirement is in that row, and then feel free to explore the government code where statute explains that and goes into that further. But we did just want to specify that transparency requirement and then the local government energy reporting requirement are two separate things. Awesome. Okay, cool. So we're coming to the end slowly but surely. We got some resources from SECO. So we've been talking about these throughout the presentation, but SECO has some really great no-cost resources to help our entities achieve any energy management or efficiency goals that they have. So as Cassidy mentioned, her City Efficiency Leadership Council, this is a peer-to-peer networking opportunity that CELC, Cassidy puts on monthly educational webinars. She also holds regional roundtables. This is really all about getting information about new resources out and sharing information peer-to-peer. So it's a great, if you are interested in that, definitely reach out to Cassidy. She would love to have you involved in those. And then SECO's just technical assistance efforts in general. I'm going to get into the PEAs in a little bit, and then SECO's actual no-cost technical assistance a little bit further on in the next couple slides. And then Watt Watchers is a education and behavioral program, which is to influence behavior changes in schools and for families, which is related to energy efficiency measures. And then as we're here today, the local government energy reporting. So providing technical assistance for this reporting requirement is something SECO, of course, is available for questions, but Cassidy and I are actively involved with. So any questions for that can be directed to us for sure. And then next up, the Lone Star Revolving Loan. This is a loan that finances projects to reduce energy, water, and utility costs. This is a 2% with a 2% loan interest rate and 1% with ARA funds if those are chosen. The deadline, so open enrollment is here starting. The deadline is August 31st of this year. Awesome. I know I'm speeding through these, y'all. I'm so sorry. Next slide. Thank you, Cassidy. Okay, great. So just delving in a little bit more to the PEAs, you can access the service request form and more information on SECO's website. So all of those are linked on this slide. But this is, if you are curious at all on any of, if you're looking for a first step for energy efficiency measures, this would be the best place to go. This will offer cost-effective resource efficiency measures for your entity that you can implement to decrease your energy consumption. This is no cost to you. And this program can help guide the development of an energy management policy. You can get started benchmarking using Energy Star Portfolio Manager. Overall, it's a great program. This is what the service request form looks like. And there's more information on SECO's website, so definitely feel free to check that out. Next slide, please. Perfect. Okay, and then the no-cost technical assistance. That is also what the service request form looks like for this program. As Cassidy mentioned, this is a program that SECO contracts with engineering firms to provide entities with a customized on-site energy-related service. So ranging from basic consultation to a feasibility study, if that's what you're looking for. And this is for assistance with either energy or water-related technical matters. And then upon determination of what service you're looking for, SECO will assign an engineer to contact you and determine the level of service necessary. And then more information can be found on their webpage. And then last up, the revolving loan. I think I've kind of touched on this for the most part. There's a YouTube video for more info. If it's just a quick video if you're looking for something quick and easy. That I know it's kind of hard to see, it's in green, but more information is on SECO's webpage on this revolving loan. Again, finances projects that reduce energy, water, and utility costs. It's a simple payback period of 15 years or less, 2% loan interest rate, and then 1% if ARA funds are chosen with more reporting. So awesome. And then just we're going to close it out. Before question and answer, we just wanted to give y'all just key dates reminders quick. So the reporting deadline for the 2020 report, which is the calendar year, January 1st to December 31st of consumption. So this is February 1st of 2021 is the reporting deadline. Again, this report was revised. It used to be fiscal year or on a fiscal year basis. It is now on calendar year, and just those minimum data points we want you to include: that time frame, your annual electricity consumption in kilowatt hours, and that gross square footage of all of your entity-owned buildings and facilities. Again, this is electricity consumption or energy consumption for your entity-owned buildings and facilities. And then we also wanted to, oh, thank you, perfect. So we got this appendix slide. It's got a bunch of links that we think might be helpful for things we've talked about today. That FAQ guide, Cassie's FAQ guide, the full statute, SECO's energy reporting webpage, definition of cost effective, and then if you have any concerns on if you are an affected county, if you fall within an affected county, definitely feel free to check out that rule that establishes and defines what an affected county is. Awesome, okay. So we've got about 8 minutes. We are more than happy to take any and all questions. I know Cassie, you were chatting it up in the chat, so thank you. But yes, we will open it up to any questions that you all have.
I want to loop back to there was a request for a little more clarification on the baseline. So the question is, what is the baseline that was mentioned before? So the baseline is the year's worth of consumption that you are that establishes what you are trying to reduce 5% from. So your baseline year is supposed to be the calendar year 2020 under this new version of the statute. Mm-hmm. So you don't necessarily need to show a reduction this year. You're just reporting your overall consumption. And then next year you say, we have reduced 5% from last year's consumption, or we haven't reduced 5% from last year's consumption. Does that help? Also, feel free to reach out to one of us offline if you need more help with that idea.
Exactly. And going off of that, Cassie, in relation to the exemption, making sure we are really, because 2019 was setting that per legislation, setting it as a baseline. So this year, 2020, your consumption reported, just making sure that if an entity is concerned about requesting for an exemption, just explaining that this new year is just acting as a baseline. So just go ahead and submit your data. And then next year in 2021, if you observe that you did not meet a 5% for that reduction goal, then considering the exemption request then. But we're really just trying to get as many people reporting, because this is a baseline year, getting all of that data into SECO as much as possible, rather than going to the exemption right away, because there is, we're not trying to compare to before the baseline, if that makes any sense. I don't know if that did. Okay. Then I see this question from Paul. What is the consequence for not reaching the 5%? And I don't know, Fred, I might hand that over to you in relation from SECO's perspective. Any sort of consequence for not reaching that 5% reduction goal in electricity?
Well, that's always a question that comes up for everyone, utilities, state agencies, local governments, and it's a target goal. The idea is that, you establish a target and you try to make efforts to achieve those. The only consequence may be that these reports eventually go to, the TCEQ, the legislature, or the Legislative Budget Board. I don't know in how much detail, but these reports go to those entities.
Mm-hmm. Great question. Great question.
There was another question earlier on about kind of following on to that whole issue of a lot of staff have been working from home. There may be folks who are interested in finding ways to support energy efficiency and energy savings at home. Especially, you know, this has been a big challenge as we're all running our at-home air conditioning and heating systems a lot more than we were last year. I know I've seen a change in my consumption this year at my house. So Watt Watchers, Dorothy briefly touched on Watt Watchers, but Watt Watchers is a behavior and education program that initially started for school districts. But they have been developing more content it's kind of for kids to take home to their parents. But I believe they have some more robust sort of sophisticated guidance. But then there's also a ton of guidance from Department of Energy, from ACEEE, which is an energy efficiency organization. Basically for the first half of 2020, every energy efficiency organization said, here's a bunch of ways to save energy at home. So a little Googling might help too on that.
That's a good, wonderful. And yep, like Cassidy mentioned, if you all are curious if your entity has submitted this report before or in the past, and we haven't reached out with any previous reporting data, definitely feel free to reach out to us. We are more than happy to provide assistance where we can. Yep, and our contact information is up on the screen. So any questions that you all have, again, more than happy to answer. And yes, any questions, I'll stay on for a couple more minutes, but thank you all so much.